before we get started, I would like to introduce the fact that we have a special guest with us. Nathaniel, hello.
Hello, I'm so glad to be here. Finally glad y'all let me on.
Oh my god.
Well, it's been a good amount of having guests.
I just closed my laptop and leave. Y'all do your own thing. I'm just like, well, now that you've disrespected me.
All right, so we have with us today a special guest. We have Thea. What's up?
Hey.
So, what makes you so qualified to talk about Halloween, such as we all three are?
I'm a paranormal tour guide, and I do a lot of work in that. I write horror stories and gothic stories. I do a horror limited run style, serialized style audio fiction podcast, but overall, I'm actually not that qualified. I just really like spooky stuff.
You're a perfect fit. None of us are qualified.
Over the garden wall, two brothers find themselves lost in a mysterious land and try to find their way home. That's literally all you need to get started in this story, because it's almost a series of like folksy, spooky short stories. And Thea, since you're our special guest, would you like to start out with your initial thoughts?
Well, I kind of feel like being on this episode was a little bit cheating, just because I already went into my watch through knowing that I loved the show. But yeah, overall, even as like my third or fourth watch through, I thought that it was really awesome. Like the first 5 episodes are fun, but they're just more like spooky short stories. And if you really look at the show as a whole, the number one thing that I come away from it at the very end with is that it's basically a cold open for the first like 8 episodes. Like you don't really know what's going on. Like they leave you on a cliffhanger kind of for like the audience to just kind of, I guess from a writing perspective, fill in the parts of the story they want to be true. And then by the time you get to the end, you're like, wait, so all this stuff that I've been seeing along the way, the train you hear in the opening of each episode, like it all connects to how the story the catalyst of the story, what kind of started it all. But you have no idea until the last 2 episodes. So it's really cool writing. And even as my, like I said, 3 or 4th listen through, I really enjoyed it. I think that the writing is really cool. And that's kind of the main thing I look for, especially in scary movies and scary spooky stories. So I don't know. I liked it.
Cool.
I love it.
Yeah, this was my first time ever seeing it. I hadn't even really heard of it until getting to this kind of thing we're doing this month and all that. I loved it. Like, I was immersed in the world right away. Literally could not stop watching it. Like, it was so good. It reminded me, in a way, of Aaron Morgenstern's writing, who wrote The Night Circus and the Starless Sea, where it puts the world first. Like, the world comes before the characters, comes before the story or all that. Like, you're just wrapped up in this world, in this tale that's being told. And then, in a way, like the story almost ends up taking a backseat to that, and the characters come in front of that as well. And honestly, in a way where even though the show drops you in the middle of this strange world and this strange setting and doesn't really give you any answers till the last few episodes, part of me almost like didn't even want those answers by the end. Like part of me was just so into the world, I would have been fine if it just left it as a bizarre series of stories.
I really enjoyed this. I have kind of a complex relationship with animated works, animated miniseries, shows, all that jazz, just because I get a lot of recommendations for them all the time, and I feel like so often I hear some of the best ones are like about as good as live action equivalents. And what I really love about Over the Garden Wall is that it can really only be done in this animated style and does so many fun things. I'm kind of slow on the pickup for a lot of things in life. It's something I really realized that is so fun about this and the world that it creates. And as Nathaniel said, so much of it is you getting lost in this world, is it really gives your imagination a complete jump start on everything. Like you're going through like a ferry boat down the river with frogs in, in old-fashioned clothing, and you just suddenly recognize you think it's okay because this is what this world has created. A group of pumpkin people showing up and having their own fairly civil cult. Or a family of bluebirds. There's all these different things that it creates in this world that you believe because these storytellers have the authority to be able to forge these worlds and these characters. And I think they do a really good job with that. I love the aesthetic. I love the style. I think it's a fun time.
I actually saw this show back in about 2015. It was about a year after it had come out. And since then, I've seen it maybe 4 or 5 times. And since then, like on concurrent watch-throughs, I pick up like different little answers or different little things that they put throughout. Kind of has the Gravity Falls feeling of, hey, let's have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and just keep it that way, and not make it go on for so long that we forget what our original intent was. And I don't know, I think it's a great time. I think the music is fantastic, and there's even, it's something that's very accessible to like young people or older people, or like it's really for any age, but the more you dig into it, the more you get out of it.
It feels like a very like old school form of storytelling, and I'm wondering if y'all understand what I mean when I say that. Because like it feels like an Aesop's fable, it feels like an Odyssey, but it has this like new overtone to it that you are kind of left wondering what kind of world they're actually in. It's not purely antique, it's not purely vintage. There is a modern kind of twist to it. There's funny jokes, there's crude jokes.
Are you gonna do something there?
Nah, we're just gonna hang out and drink age-appropriate drinks.
Nothing too bad, but just like stuff that wouldn't normally be in such an old school way of telling a story, but somehow it works,
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying, because it is, especially your first watch through, I imagine, it's a few episodes before you even realize, like, oh, maybe I should question how these kids ended up in the forest.
Yeah, why are there 2 kids walking around the forest? Like, how did we get here?
One thing I really like about it too, and I think you have to factor in the context of Cartoon Network published this. This wasn't some super small separate indie project, and something I really like that I feel like they did a little bit differently than a lot of contemporary animated works, particularly contemporary animated works that are designed to appeal to both adults and children, is it is a very funny show. It never to me feels overly harsh or cynical either, which I really appreciate. I feel like there's a certain payoff where if you're going to have adult jokes and humor that appeals to, grown-ups, but also kids, there's a lot of times a certain level of harshness and cynicism in it. And I feel like it doesn't have that. It has dark jokes, but it never seems to compromise overall a fairly wondrous and optimistic viewpoint of this world and these characters and how they interact.
Have you listened to anything I've been saying? For the last couple hours, I've been saying...
Well, that settles it. I'm gonna walk up 10 feet ahead of you.
And I think it's impressive to be able to handle gothic themes, handle a sort of spooky aesthetic, while still ultimately, I think many times, finding out that you can assume the best of others. There's multiple segments, multiple twists where a character might seem ominous or ill-intentioned or foreboding, and end up having realistic motivations and being less harmful than you would expect. And I think it's kind of cool to have a sort of Halloween aesthetic series that has gothic elements, but is still ultimately pretty kind and hopeful.
I was gonna make a comment about Wirt's character development, which is something I actually didn't pay attention and really pay attention to until this watch through, because you have this character that is so everything he could take personal responsibility for in the beginning, he doesn't. He is the most irresponsible person that out of most of the cartoons that I watch. He does not take personal responsibility at all, and he doesn't take responsibility for the people that he is put in charge of taking care of and protecting. And I actually tried to watch for that this time, and watched for his character development kind of being just this development of taking care of his brother, taking care of himself, and learning to actually own up to his mistakes. And it was really interesting.
Yeah, and that's one reason why I love the fact that it's like a short story, and that's like, hey, you have 10 episodes. That's what makes it accessible and very, like, I could suggest it to anyone. It gives you like those first 4 episodes, like you guys have mentioned, to kind of get used to the world. And then when you hit like the 6th episode, when they get on that ferry ride to Adelaide's house, that's when it starts to get like just main storyline. And by the end of it, you kind of get all the answers that you weren't expecting to get, like in episode 9, where like it starts out and you're like, wait, where are we now? And you start to realize, oh, this is what's been happening the whole time. There are answers for everything if you look like on the surface level of this show.
One thing I think is also kind of interesting is ultimately, I mean, so narratively there's significance, but ultimately how small a part Adelaide really plays in the story. Like, you think it's going to be a much bigger thing than it is, but the whole experience with Adelaide is like 5 minutes probably.
And oh my god, her cabin is terrifying.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, truly, like, there are moments that are, this is another thing, there are moments that are truly like a true horror kind of experience in very, very small doses, in very, very controlled parts of the show, where you have like the monsters, you have like the girl that transforms and tries to eat them at one point, and then they banish the demon from her. Like, those are, I watched them this time and I was like, these are truly a little bit scary.
Yeah, would definitely recommend this. Just absolutely beautiful world, beautiful animation. We didn't talk about that much, but just gorgeous, like, picturesque shots all throughout. Great characters, like we said, very tight, intricate storytelling, all very well done. And something that I think feels very human and relatable, even though you have stories about, like, frogs and suits on a ferry and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm really glad I got a chance to see this.
I really enjoyed this. This is my first time watching it. It's one of the first ones in this list of movies that it's really been my first full experience with. And I think it was a really fun time. As I said, like any great art, it was a journey. It was a very fun journey, and I feel like I've been made better for having gone on it. I love the themes. I love the aesthetics of it. I think it does a really good job of being accessible while still crafting characters in an interesting, mature way. I really enjoy each step of the narrative. I enjoy the world building, and not just for Halloween, but I think for any time. It's a great experience to have. So I highly recommend it.
Of course, I'm going to recommend this to anyone and everyone that I get a chance to. It handles its dark themes without feeling very cynical or bleak or being too heavy-handed about it. It has excellent acting and writing and even like excellent castings, particularly to me, the casting of Greg, who's acting and written like how a child would act, and never feels like, even in dark situations where he's about to die, he never feels like he's like gets dark or weathered or cynical about the situation that's around him. And it's a kind of innocent story that I feel like anyone could like appreciate or get something out of. The music is very appropriate and fun and catchy, and like I just go back to it multiple times, like just listening to it. It's on Spotify. Overall, I feel like it's one of the best animated creations that I've ever seen. I've watched it multiple times. You could sit through it in one sitting, and I wholeheartedly believe that it's for anyone and everyone.
I would definitely recommend this to basically everybody, no matter where your interests typically lie. At least give it a shot. Everything from the brilliant kind of surprise writing to the Gothic 18th and 19th century Americana themes, the folklore that's kind of integrated into it, the bizarre characters like the frogs on the boat that we keep going to because I think it's just like kind of a joyous little part of the show. Yes. Everything good. 10 out of 10. And also, I want to visit that cemetery really badly.
Bert, you tricked me. I didn't know this was a frog hunt all along.
It never was.
Yeah, so you can check out my other works at www.theadora.me, or you can go directly to my podcast website, which is www.thatcreepypodcast.com. Nathaniel's in it. He does a great job. He's one of my main characters. If you like small town gothic horror, which I'm assuming if you like Over the Garden Wall, you probably have at least some level of interest in, I highly recommend my own podcast because I think it's pretty good. And the second season will be coming out pretty soon. So, yeah. Look forward to that. It's going to be pretty damn good.
Yeah, Thea will be returning for Coraline, which is on the 21st. And next we have Poltergeist. which I still know very little about, and I'm very excited to check it out.
One of my
because
favorites.
It's something that I've been looking forward to for a while. All I know is that it's a PG horror film.
Wait, is it seriously PG?
Yes.
I didn't know that. That's so
I will-
weird.
So yeah, that wraps up another one of our episodes, and we will see you guys at some other point tomorrow. Yeah, it's gonna be tomorrow. Cool. Well,
Cool.
bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye.